Greetings and welcome to Office Hours. If you are new here and you want to learn a little bit more about what we do, you can head over to officehours.global. Our first hour, we answer all of your questions on media and digital productions. And our second hour, we typically want to spend a little bit more time. And today we'll be speaking with MIKY BLAK, and we'll be talking about all things AI and advertising and how this tech is shifting how agencies do business. So you want to go ahead, submit your questions into Mukana. And if you're watching the replay, you can still be a part of the conversation. Just go over to askofficehours.global. Well, Bill, let's get into it.
Absolutely, Liberty. Our first question comes from Mike Edwards today in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, everyone. For houses of worship especially, is a CCLI, a church copyright license, necessary with streaming for songs where YouTube's channel isn't monetizing anyway? And are there any other recommendations to think through? Thanks.
Go ahead, Alex.
In general, so technically, yes. Yes, you should have a CCLI. You should have a license for anything that you're playing through YouTube. Will it actually catch up with you? Probably not. So generally, most modern libraries will not give you a strike for running their song. So what they'll do is they'll give you a flag, and that means you can't monetize the stream, but they're not going to actually do anything about it. So they, other than flagging it and tracking it and making sure that you can't monetize it. So this has a big impact on YouTubers that are trying to, there's a lot of discussion every time they get demonetized because that's how they're making their money. So that's really been the stick that YouTube has kind of moved into. There are a couple old-fashioned bands like the Eagles and a couple others that are pretty aggressive about it. The best way to solve this is to create a burner account in YouTube and put things up and just play the live stream through it and see what happens. Now, YouTube will take videos that you upload and tell you what the flag is going to be. So you can also upload a video with all the songs you're planning to use on a Sunday, and it'll tell you before it publishes it whether there is a violation. I just don't think it'll tell you what the response of the violation is. It may, but I think it may not tell you that. So I think the way to be most accurate about it is to go ahead and live stream it to an account that's not your account, just in case you get a strike. Now, you don't have to worry. Strikes are typically, the big problem you have is, will it take your live stream down while you're live? And that's what you want to, that's really what you're testing there, because after that, you just kind of let it go. I'm assuming that you're not that worried about the VOD as much as you might be worried about a little bit about it, but if you're not worried about monetization, typically you can get away with it. But I would, the technical and legal way to manage this is to get the copyright license that you need. And I would recommend it if you're going to be doing it regularly. But the chances of a church actually being, affected by any of these rules is not zero, but very close.
Next question.
Scott Mueller's up next from Germantown, New York, looking to buy a laptop for vMix production. I hadn't considered how loud these high-end laptops can be. Any recommendations on a solid laptop for vMix production that's not screaming loud when operating, or if cooling pads will remedy this at all?
Alex?
Yeah, the problem for a lot of laptops is the fan size. So how big is the fan that's actually able to push it? Because that's really what makes a lot of the noise, because it has to be at a much higher RPM. So you're going to have a hard time. A lot of more powerful PCs have chips that run a lot harder. So they, when they're running at full tilt to support something like vMix, they're going to make noise. Typically, on the Mac side, of course, you can't run vMix, but they're a lot quieter than the PC side when it comes to this high performance push. So you may want to consider one of the things that we've done when we've done PC based streaming is typically to use some version of a desktop or some kind of shuttle or a smaller computer that's going to have larger fans. It's easier for you also to build an enclosure for those that's going to give it more cooling to make that possible. So we've done all variety of things, of just more airflow to literally building AC systems, which make their own noise for the PCs to keep them cool when they're really working hard. So those are a couple things to think about. But I think that you may not be able to find exactly what you're looking for on a PC. There might be some folks that are watching that have some suggestions on quieter PCs, but I have not seen a truly quiet PC laptop ever. So that's high performance.
Next question.
Toby Weber in Germany is up next. I'm looking for a web-based tool where technicians have a checklist and can indicate the status of a current task, started, in progress, completed. An overview of all workstations should be visible to the supervisor.
Courtney?
Well, if you're a whiz at Excel or any type of spreadsheet programming or layout, use Google Sheets. It's an online tool. It's free. It can be used. We use it here to set up community sign-up sheets and everything to run office hours on. So you can set up your own, lay out your own checklist for your individual students to check off, and then the supervisor could name the ranges of that checklist and put that in another tab for the supervisor's view only, and could monitor the status of all those checks, and they're maintained in real time in the web. So that might be a good use for Google Sheets.
I'm wondering if Notion could be valuable. Shout out to Lori with Now It's Clean. She put me on to Notion, and just how you're able to, there's so many templates out there that you can find. So either finding someone who can customize Notion overall for you, but then also finding templates. And some of the ways that I can see this happening is if you are able to get like a master sheet within Notion, and then having the master project in the overarching area, and then beneath that, it can be segmented out for each technician. And then that way everybody can see all areas. We use it with like our project planning. So we have a table built out, and the beautiful thing with Notion is you can get so granular from like page level, and then task level, and then within the task, and tabs. So check out Notion and see if that's something that might be able to fit this need. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Paul Wallace in Hot Springs, Arkansas. How do you embed a Google Map or Google Place in a Google Doc, slide, or web page?
Go ahead, Ken. You're on mute.
I can demonstrate how you do it on a web page. I'll go here. You can see that screen sharing. Basically, you go to Google Maps, and you see here is a share button. If you click on that share button, then you see here where you've got embed a map. You click on embed a map. You can choose the size that you want that map, stick with medium, and then just copy the HTML, and then you can then embed that HTML into a web page. So that's how you embed a Google map into a web page.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and Douglas says, I've always envisioned a mixer with proper faders, but would the A&H CQ-12T be a good choice for a basic studio for DAW tracking and office hours, after hours attendance? The US $899 price is cheap for what you get, and he's got a link to it there.
Ken?
Hi, Douglas. I would recommend one step up from that. This is what I have. I'm very new to mixing, and I got the CQ-18T. The reason for that, it has these other soft, what they call buttons, where you can program them. So you don't have to use the touch screen. You can then use the buttons on here, so you can adjust there or adjust the panning on this. So the one up from that has more of these control buttons, which you can then pre-assign, because, even though touchscreen is great and you can get all the different menus and stuff like that, but actually the fine-tuning via an actual physical knob is, I find, much more accurate and much more working with, especially if I'm mixing music. So that's what I'd recommend.
Alex?
I love the idea of touchscreens and really taking over with all those controls. I just never use them. So when I actually get mixers that do that without any kind of tactile controls or with very little, that really depend on it, I find myself putting them down and not really using them as much as I could have. So I tend to, the problem is that if I look at one of these things, again, I like the idea that I could, and where we see a lot of Allen and Heath's used oftentimes is support for small bands, where someone's going to walk around and they're going to listen to the mix and they're going to have their iPad and they're going to make adjustments and so on and so forth. But I think that I just find myself not using them very often. So I think that I would really think about, for the use cases that you have shown here of tracking and office hours and after hours, you're really looking for an audio interface, not really a mixer. So if you're looking for, and I think that that's the thing that I would consider.
And Jason.
Yeah, the two of them nailed it.
Next question.
Rick James in Toronto, Ontario, Canada says, I just volunteered to help a local music festival with general technology to minimize staff and or costs. What software is recommended to create a presentation or slideshow that would include the logo, land acknowledgement video, and a licensed movie?
Go ahead, Bill.
So you didn't say whether you're on Mac or PC. That's going to be a difference. If it was me and I'm Mac-based, I would definitely just look at Keynote. Keynote's been one of the most strong and consistent and never-failing technologies I've used. And if you're on a budget and you don't have people, a lot of people know how to use those basic programs. The only thing that really concerns me here is you're talking about a licensed movie. If you have copy protection on that movie, if you've licensed it yourself and you have the rights, no problem. But if you're trying to use a licensed movie, you're going to have to deal with the possibility of copy protection giving you a trouble when you play it back. So that's kind of the low-end stuff. Alex may have some better suggestions at the higher end.
Go ahead, Alex.
No, I actually, for something that is inexpensive, I would say PowerPoint or Keynote is what a lot of people would use here. Now, there's other things that you could use. You could use things like QLab or MIDI or, there's a variety of other tools that you could use. Canva would be another one that you could probably use for those types of things. But if someone's listing what you have here, I would probably be tempted to use Keynote. Or PowerPoint on a PC. So I think those would be relatively easy. The one thing you'll find that's a little hard with any kind of presentation tool is they tend not to be perfectly frame accurate when playing out. So if the computer is a little pressed, you can't put it on a little old computer and run it and expect the video to come out well. So one thing to think about is really playout engines. So there's like Playout B, which Jonas Dottel here in our group creates for Mac, PC, Raspberry Pi, or other tools that might play out the video separately. And so you might want to think about that process. What's nice about the presentation tools, it's really easy to change things and move things around. And they have lots of little built-in layout tools, snapping to center, snapping to each other, snapping to scale and everything else. And for a lot of slides, like for instance, usually when I have broadcast slides that are just going up, I build those all in Keynote. Not because I'm going to play them out, just because it's really fast. It's really fast for me to replace everything, update everything, move those things around. And so those are so that's a lot easier. The one place that you may want to change it is when you're playing out the video. Keynote does a much better job than it used to, and PowerPoint does as well, but they still will sometimes drop frames here and there. And so you may want a dedicated playout system that you're going to cut to for that. And again, that doesn't have to be expensive. Playout B is not a very expensive app. And you run it on a separate machine typically, and then just cut back and forth between them. You may find that works well.
And in the chat, Mickey said resolve, and I was actually curious how that would work. So hopefully he'll respond shortly.
I think that'd be a heavy-handed landing. Resolve is free, so you would have it there, and you could have those things there. But I think being able to control them, loop them, jump to them, so on and so forth, might be a little harder.
Okay. And then David says that he's a big fan of MIDI for playback, and it can be rented per event. Next question.
Burkhard Friedrich in Isterburg, Germany is up next. He says, Manual for the birddog Play states it is possible to load up a custom full HD PNG on the device for startup. Any hints where in the web graphic user interface this can be done?
Courtney?
Well, I don't have a birddog Play, but I did look at the manual, and there is a section under AV Setup, under Device Settings, that says Select Splash Screen, and that's where you want to go to load your custom startup screen. You have to abide by the create your graphic according to this with a PNG format. It has to be 19 by 1920 by 1080 resolution. It has to be less than 5 megabytes in size, and it has to have 8-bit color depth. And I believe in that in that menu, it'll say select splash screen, and there's a little pull down up here, and you set it to custom logo. I'm not sure if your logo has to be named something specific other than custom logo. And if you select custom logo, it may then guide you through uploading your file, which has been previously prepared.
Next question.
It comes to us from the Holy Tabernacle Church International in Mesquite. We're looking for instructions on how to put our pan-tilt zoom cameras in 4K mode.
Jason?
Depends very heavily on which 4K camera you have and whether or not it's capable. So I had to run out and get this. This is a birddog NDI 400, what is it? P400. And it actually has, it's too small, I cannot get close enough, but there is a tiny little video format dial here that you can turn, and it will actually physically set the output. But again, it's going to depend very heavily on which kind of camera you have.
Alex?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing with Jason. Let us know, maybe ask the question again, but let us know what the make and model of your hard. It's going to be different for every single camera. So let us know what is the make and model of your camera, and we can probably figure out how to do that pretty quickly.
And I just want to take a moment. Mickey mentioned in the chat when I asked about the resolve part. So Rick's question actually asked how he could create the assets for that. And we more so focused on so lots of valuable insight on how to play it out, but for creating the actual assets.
And I guess what I would say, I would say for the slides, I would still use Keynote. so to put those together, it's really an easy way. Even if you have a little bit of movement there. For the video, Resolve could be a good one, but it's any video editing app at that point that you would use for that. But Resolve is a good one because it's free. But what I will say is, if you haven't done this kind of work before, Resolve is deep water. So it's it's not like it's really easy to not have things come out the way you expected them to. Is a lot more work. So if you already have the videos. Then what I would say is I would still stand by a presentation tool to keep it easy. If you're creating them, it's going to be a lot more time that you're going to spend working on those. But Resolve is free and cross-platform, but it's really, it just depends on whether you value time or money more, because it will take you a week to understand. If you've never done video editing and you're getting started, it'll take you a week to produce things reliably out of Resolve. So if, it's not a quick start. It's a really heavy. I use it for a lot of things, but I wouldn't put that on someone like, oh, I'm going to do something in a week or two, and I'm going to use Resolve to do the edit. I'd be a little concerned.
Yeah, and then Alex did mention this one previously when we responded, Canva. So Canva also, you are able to do that. Just note that there is, if you need to use their assets in creating like some of their pro assets, then there you would need a license for that. And I think it's roughly around $12 now a month if you don't already have that.
And if you're on a Mac, another easy one to really throw things together if you need little motion graphics and little things moving around is to also look at motion as far as something to create. Apple Motion is $50, so it's not as expensive as Resolve. But the speed at which you can throw something together is pretty outstanding. I use it all the time. So my two things that I use for most of my display graphics when I'm building something for a live show is Keynote and Motion. So I build all my slides in Keynote. And I build all my little graphics and countdown clocks and everything else inside of Motion. I don't use heavier apps for that because Motion will also render extremely quickly, so I can make adjustments. I set up the Michael Krasny show with a bunch of new slides and a countdown clock, and right now I'm clocking in at about 8 minutes.
Yeah, and I'll also throw in InShot, and then if you, as Alex said, like giving yourself enough lead time wherever they're going to play this out to also test that as well so that everything runs smoothly.
And Rayon put in CapCut. Just if you're going to use CapCut, it's a very powerful application. You do need to read the user license, the EULA for CapCut. It is the most aggressive privacy release that I've ever seen. And given that it's a Chinese company, as an American, you go, whoa, So the reason I don't have CapCut on my machine, on any of my machines, is because of the EULA. So just be really careful. I'm a big fan of TikTok, but the EULA on CapCut is aggressive. So just make sure you read it before you install it on something.
Next question.
Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York is up next. Any opinion on mini LED displays versus IPS?
Jason?
Mini LED displays are pretty good. IPS is the standard. IPS is in-plane switching, and in forever has been kind of the way that it is. So, mini LED is better, but definitely more new.
Go ahead, Bill.
So I have IPS displays. I have 3 of them around me, one vertical that I use for my script reading, one horizontal that I use every day on the show to show various things. And I have been just astonished that you can get a monitor that thin and that bright and that useful. And when I drag things from those IPS displays onto my laptop, pretty fully configured, relatively modern M2 MacBook Pro, I don't see a lot of shifting in colors and things like that. I still would not consider those IPS monitors to be a grading monitor by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm amazed at how inexpensive and good they have been for me. I travel everywhere with them. They're really easy to mount. I'm not saying that mini LED might not have technical advantages and be brighter and better in some circumstances, but these have been fabulous and they're cheap. So that's my 2 cents.
And Courtney.
Well, I'm confused by this question because mini LED displays usually refers to mini LEDs that are used for backlighting a large display, which uses local area dimming. In other words, they turn off the backlights in the areas that are supposed to be black, so it gives you much richer blacks. But all mini LED displays that are not micro LED, that are not direct view LEDs, or OLEDs, which are organic LEDs, which you view directly, almost all of them use LCD or in-plane switching LCD shutters in front of the pixels in front of those mini LEDs. So you have a combination of both. If it's just a straight IPS monitor, it gives you a pretty broad angle of view. So IPS switching will give you a broader angle of view, and if it just has a common backlight, in other words, an edge lit white diffuser behind it without any local area dimming, you'll get a pretty good display. But local area dimming with an mini LED is a little better. And if you can get QLED, which is quantum dot, which means they use quantum dots for the red, green, blue filters that are in those LCD displays, gives you much richer colors. So I'd go for that. And if you're talking about OLED displays, that's a different story completely. OLED is direct view and is used in a lot of higher end grading monitors, but not HDR because they can't get quite bright enough yet.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Alan Scott in Nyatek, Mexico. I'm out of town on a brief vacation seeing Spanish language YouTube ads. Is this normal when traveling?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yes, the interconnected webs of the world kind of understands where you're coming in from, and in different markets you will get different languages and things like this. This is when I'm traveling, and particularly the few times I've been out of the country in the last 5 years since the pandemic, it's the localization is a big deal, and so I don't think you can get around it very easily unless you use something to appear you're coming from a different place. I don't know why that term's escaping, but Courtney, take
the VPN. Yeah,
VPN. Thank you. Yeah, virtual private network.
Yeah,
go ahead, Courtney.
Since you live in Mexico, you might expect it to serve Spanish language ads wherever you go. If you're logged into your account, your YouTube account, if you're logged into your YouTube account, it knows who you are and where you normally live, and it will serve up ads based in your native language if you're from Mexico and normally you set up your account in Mexico. So even when you travel to other countries where that may not be the native language, it will still probably serve you. If you log out and just go into YouTube without logging in, you'll probably see YouTube knows the language of the ISP and the IP address that you're at, and will serve up ads based on the language of the IP address you're at, I believe.
I almost feel like this is a great question later on for Mickey when he comes in. But yes, you will see different ads. It's called geofence targeting, geo-targeting. So based on your location that people are putting ad spend behind a certain area, that could vary even square blocks depending on how targeted that is. So it's not you, it's them. Next question.
Mandy Van Cleve in Cincinnati, Ohio is up next. And has anyone experimented with the iOS, iPadOS eye contact FaceTime setting on by default? And it says establish natural eye contact while on FaceTime.
Jason.
I have. It's much more subtle than the ones that are a lot creepier and more aggressive. It does a decent job, and as with anything like this, it's most useful when it's completely and totally benign, and you can't even tell it's happening. But yeah, it's okay.
Alex?
The hard part is really you have to be 100% or you're at 0%. And what I mean by that is that if anyone notices it at all, it's going to weird them out, and then they're going to not be able to think about anything other than those eyes doing something weird. And so I think that you have to be very careful of using it. I tend to turn all that stuff off. I'd rather have them see exactly what I'm seeing. I think that the drive to trying to make things easy rather than doing them correctly is bothering people. I think they don't notice how much it's bothering them, but of course the fake backgrounds and blurs and all the edges and everything else that actually adds to cognitive load because it bothers people when they look at it, and they kind of give up on it mentally, but it's still affecting them. And so I think that if they do it seamlessly and perfectly, I think it's fine. But I haven't seen it done seamlessly and perfectly yet, where you look at it and there's just something wrong. You can't quite figure it out, and that disconnects people from what they're looking at. And so I would recommend against it, but I haven't used it recently, so we'll take a look at it.
And for our producers, keep those questions coming. Today is a great day for all questions on media and production, and of course, anything business relating, as that's typically our Monday subjects just before we get into our second hour. Next question.
Scott Mueller's up next from Germantown, New York, and Scott says laptops used to have a little slot made for Kensington Locks. MacBooks don't seem to have it anymore. I'm not sure about the new thinner PC laptops. How are you securing your laptops at events?
Alex.
Yeah, the first thing that you do is you want to make sure that if you're going to events, you're going to install some mobile device management, MDM. So if it's your laptop, you're going to put MDM on it, and what that means is that you know where that laptop is. You can get back into it. You can even erase it. Now, Apple has some of these features built into it now. So some of those things, if you buy a modern Apple laptop, you can actually see where it went. So you can trace it back to, I think Apple has a really funny ad about that, but everything has Find My built into it now. So you can simply, if someone takes your laptop, and here's the key, if they get anywhere, it doesn't have to have the internet access. All it has to do is be near an iPhone. So literally, if they turn it on and it's anywhere near an iPhone, it's going to tell you where it is within 30 feet. And so that stealing new Apple laptops has lost a lot of its shine because of that. When you install MDM, what you have is the ability to log into that laptop, and even you can see the location, but you can also see things like, what are they doing on it? And so that helps you figure out who they are. Someone stole one of my laptops, and within a week, I knew the businesses that they had started and failed. I knew where their ex-wife lived, and I knew everything about what their kid likes to play on games, because that's what they used. That's what they did. They stole my laptop and they gave it to their kid. We chose not to take it anywhere because we were just trying to figure out where our laptop was. And so the thing is that it nowadays it's not very fun to. Once we realized they just gave it to their kid, we just filed it for insurance. But I think that it's really dangerous to steal new laptops now. When it comes to actually securing them, the number one time you're going to lose your laptops is typically when you're loading in and loading out, and when you leave them overnight. And so that's usually when we pay the most attention to it. And people don't usually steal the laptop in the middle of the show. At least we've never seen that. It might happen. And so what we do is we have secure racks that we put those into that take enough time that they make enough noise that if you try to open them in the middle of the night, it's problematic, and we have a lot of cameras. So when we work at a large facility, we might have 6 to 8 cameras that are all pointing at each other. It would be very hard to approach our space without us having a record of you being there, and then it would be hard to get into there without us seeing it. So and we. That one laptop that I mentioned there is the only one we've lost. And we had, in PixelCore, we had probably 60 laptops that traveled all over the world on a constant basis. Sometimes we lost them and found out that someone was still using one in Switzerland because we left it with them or something like that. But we didn't. We only had one stolen out of almost 2,000 events.
Courtney?
Yeah, this is a problem. That's why they came up with the Kensington lock slot that's on most PCs these days, except for Apple, because they hate holes in laptop cases with a passion. So the only solution that would be, and I can imagine a situation where, you get up from your desk where you're doing the graphics for a show or something, the show hadn't started yet, you get up, go get a cup of coffee and come back and, hey, somebody has just picked up your laptop and walked off with it. And that's certainly possible if they turn it off. Even if you have the tracking software that Alex mentioned on it, they'll take it back. Professional theft rings will take it back to their Faraday cage, turn it back on, and do a reset on it.
They can't. They'll
take it apart and sell it for parts.
They can sell it for parts, but that's literally all they can get for a Mac. Once it's and it's really
they're resettable.
So the problem is that they're not resettable. Like that's the whole thing. If you turn on in the new Macs, if you turn the security on, and this is why Apple, for instance, gets into this matched part system. So if you take that thing apart, it won't Apple will not allow you to use those parts again. And so that's so the thing is that it makes it so basically, stealing a new Mac from a person who turned the security on is just basically stealing metal. Like there's no way.
So
to
you
get
can
that.
never sell your Mac to anyone. Right?
No, you can release it from that security. But if you've turned your security on before, now if they get you to turn that off before they steal it from you, then you're. But if someone just picks up your Mac and runs off with it, any Mac made in the last 2 years, and you turned on the security, you have to turn it on. But if you've turned on the security and someone steals your Mac, they just stole a bunch of aluminum. Unfortunately,
thieves don't have a conscience, and they will sell that Mac to somebody else who unknowingly bought a brick.
Yeah, it's just that I think that the issue is that when there's a lot of when the ROI is so low, I think a lot of times thieves learn pretty quickly. I mean, they're pretty well networked. They know what to buy, what to steal, and what not to steal. And the Macs are not a particularly good target because the chance of getting caught is high, and because of the tracking, and the chance of getting anything out of it is low. So again. You still what I would do, what we do every night. We don't leave any of our Macs out. Every night we put them into a shelf and we lock them up. Right. But I would say that you shouldn't be cavalier about it. But if you should be aggressive about setting all the security settings on your Mac, and one thing that's important is that your laptop should always go to sleep. So at maximum every 5 minutes. If you walk away from it, it should just turn off and then require a login. And that login, typically, if you're working in an event, should be a phrase. So a phrase, not a code, not something short, but a phrase. It's really hard to get phrases out, to put them out there. So
I would not do that on a live show where my laptop would go to sleep. If I didn't type a key or something every 5 minutes. But that's just me. And then typically, when I'm running things, you got to turn that off. We turn off, go to sleep always. And what we used to do on shows, I did a lot of TV shows where we would have product placement, Mac laptops everywhere on the set. And at the end of the day, we all have to lock them all up and put them away in a secure location. And the next morning, they have to come out and be booted back up again. Another solution you might arrive at if you have to, if you worry about somebody picking it up and walking off with it, maybe somebody who doesn't realize that they're picking up a brick, is to attach, get a longer screw and attach a little halyard on the bottom of it so that you can attach it to a steel cable so that it is not going to be a real secure but people see that, they will figure that they can't just walk off with it. It's not as tempting to them because they see it's secured to a screw on the bottom, unless they have the special screw that Mac laptops are assembled with.
And there is a website called maclocks.com that it shows them. I just don't understand how they work. Like I look at it and I go, I don't know how that would attach to the laptop. So their MacBook, if you look at it here, it's showing a cable connected to your laptop. This is a new laptop. But what I can't figure out from their website, so this is not a very good design of their website, is it doesn't really describe, it's adhesive, industrial.
I see. So they glue something to the bottom
gluing something
but
to
you
it,
could also pull out one of the screws that holds the laptop together and put a longer screw in that holds a steel hasp on it that you attach to steel.
I will say, to your point, one thing that Apple doesn't do, one thing you never do as an Apple user is take apart unscrew things on your computer. like you're just kind of like, that's something you take to the, if you're smart.
All the time.
For new ones?
Yeah.
Oh man, I like my laptop working.
Bill?
So if you just want to go old school and you're looking for something that'll deter people looking at it, there's a lot of companies that make things like this. And if you just search under anti-theft laptop security holder, you'll find a variety of rigs like that lets you bolt your laptop, even a Mac without anything on it, into a rig and then lock it down. I agree that if they want it, if they're dumb enough to want a modern laptop with all these things built into it, and I've got security turned on my main machine as well, they're nuts, but thieves often are nuts. So that's just where you play.
Next question.
Arlo Ramilton in Ireland. YouTube has Stats for Nerds. Is there a similar general tool that allows a similar analysis for other live streams on a Mac? It's a QR code
Alex?
question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's not exactly. Stats for Nerds is, by the way, I can't remember what, I think you hold down the control key or something like that and you click on it, you'll get this feed that shows you everything that's coming in, and it's really genius that they added to it. Mickey suggested VLC will show some of those things. Also, you want to look at on the Mac specifically the HTTP live streaming tools. And so there are, Apple makes their own, and they make specifically a media stream validator that you may want to look at there. So, in an HLS report. And so those are a couple things that you can look at that Apple makes. There are, but I don't know of any Mac-based ones. We've used a couple different ones. Sony makes an incredible one that we've used, but it's PC only. And so it just depends on what you're trying to validate. So that's the big thing is if you ask that question again, just include for us what stats you want from Stats from Nerds, and then we can probably take a closer look at it. David Brady suggests the HLS.js video dev org demo.
Next question.
Dan in Long Beach is up next. What was Shaq holding during the slam dunk contest last night on the Shaq cam? And he's got a link there to the image, I guess.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yes, the Shaq cam. Well, I've gone over this several times, and it looks like a custom rig. So you're going to see it right there, and then we're going to see a close-up and then a mid-shot of it. So bear with me here. There it is again. He's holding it. And let's see what we have here. It looks to me like a custom rig. We'll try this one more different way, and then we'll be able to see it again. But there we go. There we go. So it looks like a completely custom rig with a combination of a couple of just live displays that's probably just going in through wireless technology. I don't know.
I wonder where that played out to. Like if that's interesting. Great question. Next question.
Wes Decker's up next from Fort Worth, Texas. This is another QR code question. I just discovered a new feature in QuickTime in Sonoma 14.4 beta that allows you to view spatial videos, view into spatial, as either left eye, right eye, or both eyes displayed side by side. This also allows for rudimentary editing. Hope this is useful.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, this is very useful. I don't have the beta installed yet, so I'll definitely take a look at it, and we'll look at it. One of the things we've been trying to figure out is a lot of us are trying to figure out how to go from spatial to dual eye or side by side, and from side by side back to spatial. And it looks like that Apple's going to support it built in, which is great. And so we'll take a look at it. We'll keep on updating you on as we figure those things out, because a lot of us are doing a bunch of work on it right now to try to get ready for whenever we can start live streaming to the headset, and how to deliver more content that direction.
Next question.
Scott Mueller of Germantown, New York says, upcoming gig where I'll feed an IMAG from a large library of memes and photos during an event. What would be the best cataloging app that could identify the text and images and search or sort by word to quickly find and show and throw images on the screen?
Go ahead, Bill.
Others may have a more complex sense. Photos surprises me all the time by the amount of metadata searching and allowing you to search by those terms. It also has a custom field where you can apply metadata. Now, you probably want it to be generative metadata, that it's just going to see the photo and try to figure out what's in there. It does a lot of that. I mean, famously, Apple will tell you that there's all the shots with 2 people or 3 people or 1 person or whatever. So it's doing a lot of that work behind the scenes. And the more I decide I want to organize my photos collection, and that's probably where the memes would live as well, the more impressed I am with it. I don't know anything personally, because that's the one that I always go to, that does a more complex or more finer searched result answer. That's where I'd start at least.
And it also, just reading this makes me think of just really having a great, your pre-production will be key. And having like some assets that you know the probability that this or that will show up, and that would, in addition to the tool, just making the experience and the production all the more valuable.
Absolutely. This is a place where applied metadata, being able to go in and tag your photos into classifications you know you're going to probably need during your production, that's definitely where I would go as stage 1.
Next question. Yeah.
Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. What would be the smallest dimensions for a room would you guys use for a talk show production, say using HD pan tilt zooms?
Alex?
It depends. As always, it depends on what you want that to look like. In general, what I would say is 20 by 20 is probably the smallest that I would go, and I would probably say that's going to be very tight to put these in for a round table discussion if you're going back and forth. And so I would really consider something more like 25 feet or 30 feet by 30 feet. Those are going to give you a lot more room. But 20, the smallest room I've used for that kind of thing has been an 18 by 20 by about 9 feet up. And it was tight. It did look good. I mean, now one thing I will say is that as you start to use those kind of rooms, you really want to think about larger depth of field, or smaller depth of field and larger sensors, because they make small rooms look a lot. They make the small rooms look a lot bigger. So 9 feet or 3 meters up is, I would consider, the minimum height. We've done ones with 8, but it means that no one can really stand up because you can't get the camera angle right without seeing the ceiling. So if everyone's seated, you can get away with 8 feet. Otherwise, I mean, in a perfect world, you're going to be at about 12 feet. That's going to give you plenty of room for a grid and the ability to hang the lights and still have a lot of headroom there. But we've done it with, again, as I said, 9 feet by 18 by 25. But it was uncomfortable, and it really has to be PTZs at that point. Once you put people in, it's too small, too loud, and too crowded.
Courtney?
Well, if you're designing it for a podcast, I've seen some podcast studios that are I wouldn't go smaller than 20 by 20, as Alex said, because it's just not wide enough to fit a table in there. I mean, if you look at Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, the layout of their podcast, they've got a monitor at the end of an oblong table here, and they seat 4 people at it, and they have their microphones on the adjustable boom arms that can come in close, since it is a podcast, and it is covered in video as well. They've got Conan and the main person, Larry David in this case. These other 2 people are just sidekicks or producers who chime in very infrequently, and the cameras are set for cross coverage across the table with a close-up of each of these guests at the end of the table. And then they have this one wide shot at the end if they want to come out wide for any of the others. And that gives them a pretty good coverage with just 3 or 4 cameras. And you could set it up like that. And that room looks like it's about maybe 20 by 30 or 20 by 20. So I think it's possible to do in that. You want to sound treat the room if you have parallel walls in a room that small, because it's going to have a lot of standing waves and it's going to sound rather boomy if you don't treat the walls and the ceiling.
And Rayon says that it's mainly 2 people in the room. Ken?
Well, I can demonstrate. My room is long and it's very tall, but it's not very wide. So I have a PTZ set up here, so you can see it's not very wide room. This room is only 2.5 meters wide, and you can, there I am, with a PTZ, control that in quite a small space. So I find it really useful for giving an overview, or you can zoom in and out. So even in a very small room, which is, well, my room isn't very wide, you can, PTZ like this one can work quite well.
And Alex?
Yeah, I'd agree. As a single person, talking to folks, I think that I think Ken's is about the minimum size that you can make something work. But as soon as you start trying to do, multiple cameras and multiple people, I think that you might need a little bit more space to get around if they're sitting on either side of a table. Even with only two people, I would probably stick with a slightly larger room. Part of it is you want to get them away from the wall. So Ken's done a pretty effective job at kind of moving things, taking the biggest advantage of his space. But it'll really cramp you pretty tightly if you're trying to do two people or three people and having multi-camera shoots and so on and so forth. We would typically not want them to be more than or less than 2.5 to 3 feet, so about a meter away from the wall, just so that we can separate them with some depth of field.
Next question.
Eric Price in Kansas City, Kansas says, does moving or renaming a resolved project file created by an ATEM break the links with all the ISO files? If so, how do you transfer from your mobile drive, and how do you recover if you've moved it already?
Go ahead, Alex.
Well, I don't know about moving it. I know renaming your project file will, I don't know if it'll break the links, but it will, changing the name of the actual files will. But if it's, I think that you should be able to move that without any trouble. If for some reason the links are broken, you just need to rebuild it as a multicam file. So that's how you would end up doing it. But you should be able to move that file, and it should keep those links valid.
Next question.
Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri is up next, and Aaron says, does the convention that 3 days equal 1 week for gear rental also apply to staffing and live events? I've always thought no, but recently got some pushback from another production company we were working alongside.
Alex?
What? I'm sorry, but all of us are like,
you notice me stop in the middle of that. What?
Like there are certain things that people will say, and I will, I try to be understanding, and we all come from different backgrounds, and we all have different opinions about things. But there are sometimes things that people will say, and I will immediately make a decision about their intelligence forever. And this is one of them. Like I would be like, that production company is dangerous, and they have no idea what they're doing, and they may be able to do that. And what it means is they must be marking up their own. They must be marking up their own staff a lot to be able to afford to do a 3-day week. And that just sounds insane. So just so you know, that is like insanity, because you are paying people per day. So either you're paying them almost nothing and then marking it up so that you can sell it as that. But if you're doing a reasonable markup on your labor and you're handing it back to the client, they need to pay for that every day. It's not, the reason rentals work that way is completely different than the way labor works. You have the rental on a 3-day week because, were you really going to rent it the rest of the week? That's the whole thought process is once it goes out, once it comes back in, there's all kinds of back and forth. But that is an insane idea, to say, unless what it tells you is what they're doing. If they say they want a 3-day week, is they're marking up their labor so that they make a ton of money if you only do 3 days, and they still make a reasonable amount of money if you do 6 or 7 days. So that means that they're doing a very heavy markup, which means they're either charging more to the client or they're paying people almost nothing. And if they're paying people almost nothing for that, it means that they're getting the lowest quality operators that they can find, college students that took a course on camera operation. And so I think that's the I think that so either they're marking it up heavily or they're not connected to reality.
Courtney.
There are laws against that. I agree with Alex. It's there's labor, the National Labor Relations Bureau, and there's state labor laws as well that govern hiring, the salaries of people that you hire on a daily basis. You can agree on a rate, but it has to meet the minimums of that particular state. I've had producers that are unscrupulous ask me to ask me to give them a 12-hour day and only put 8 hours on my time card. That's cheating, but if you agree to it to get the job, that's on you. So I will never do that, but I'll just say, hey, that's against the law, and I'm not going to break the law. 3 days, I always hated it when we went to 3-day weeks for equipment rental. But hopefully your equipment is priced high enough that, and it's been amortized over a longer period of time, and it mostly is paid for anyway if you rent it a lot. So it's not as much of a hit to you if you get a 3-day rental for your equipment as opposed to a weekly, full week times, or 5 times your daily rate. The daily rates are usually a little bit higher to accommodate when you do a commercial or something where they're only hiring you for a day to accommodate prep and wrap out of that equipment, to clean it up after the shoot and to prep it for that shoot, because that takes time, and you include that. It takes less time to prep for a weekly shoot because you only have to prep it once instead of prep it every day.
I read this as a 3-day, asking for a 3-day week or whatever, but it is common for a lot of us in production to ask for someone a weekly rate or a monthly rate, and that rate may be lower than the daily rate. So that's what they may be trying to do, is like, give me a weekly rate. Oftentimes it's not a 3-day week. I mean, so when they ask for a 3-day equals 1 week or whatever, it's not the same. So the weekly rate is generally a little bit more, but we often do like, hey, I'm going to hire you for a month or 2 weeks or a week, and that number will be lower than the individual days that we would have paid. But usually that's done in, so that is a possibility. So they could be asking for some discount and not have it be a flat 3-day week. So that could be the case, but usually it's not just 3 days and then they get a week.
But that weekly rate is usually a guarantee when they hire you. You say, okay, I'll do it for that weekly rate, but if we only shoot 3 days, or
still paying,
you're going to pay me for the week. Yeah.
Yep.
Next question.
David Brady in New York comes up next, looking to move over to H2R Graphics. Does anyone know if it has a step-through function for sequentially playing graphics elements?
Alex?
Yeah, I think that we need to bring John Barker back on. So someone put that in the second hour request, and we'll reach out to John and see if we can come back on. I think it's been time. He's done enough updates that I keep on meaning to get him on, and I think it just falls through the cracks. And so we would love to have John Barker back on. So we'll stay tuned. We'll get him back on. He can answer those questions for you.
Next question.
Robin Cutshon, Atlanta, Georgia. I'm doing some Vision Pro programming and need objects to play with. Are there good sources of stock USDZ objects?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yes, Apple has a great resource. It's a quick look gallery, which has a great selection of them, and they're animated and stuff like that. So that's one good place to start.
And Jason?
Turbo Squid has some acceptable ones. The Smithsonian, however, has an incredible library, and I've been playing around with that for quite a while here. So those two, I think, are good places to start.
And Alex?
Yeah, just remember that also there's Reality Converter, which convert any OBJ to USDZ. So you have a way to kind of bring a lot of other things from a lot of other areas. Smithsonian is a great tip. So is the Apple website. Also, beautifulthings.xyz has a constantly updated. They have a lot of pretty good files there, cars and all kinds of other stuff. And it's designed specifically for your Apple Vision Pro, and they do look amazing. But I believe that you can download them as well. So anyway, so take a look at it there. But you can definitely look at them if you're looking at Apple Vision. But the place that I get the most impressive ones are typically the Smithsonian.
Next question.
Brody Hafner in New York City says, I installed a room exhaust fan. It's wired programmable electronic control units for fan speed and so forth. It emits a quiet but annoying tone at 2670 hertz, no matter the setting. Is this a common feature of some low-cost electronic components? Any suggestions?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it's probably a triac or an SCR dimmer that is not properly filtered, and a lot of them operate at high frequencies. To get rid of that, you could go the non-electronic route. It depends on whether you want to have it programmable, but a variac is a variable transformer. Here's a 5 amp. You need to choose one that look at the amperage of the fan that you're controlling, and then you just set the speed with this big old knob up here, which actually varies the windings on a transformer so it doesn't have electronic switching in it, which is what's creating that high frequency noise. And a lot of transistors, if they're not good transistors, you can actually hear them. They're audible, and that's what generates the high frequency noise that you're hearing.
Bill?
Yeah, I think Courtney's on exactly the right track. It's not going to be anything mechanical, because if you have a variable speed and the tone it's emitting doesn't change, it's got to be something in electronics, and it sounds like just one of those whines that's really annoying and you want to get rid of.
And Jason?
My suggestion is completely get rid of it. You need home theater fans. They are cool. They are not terribly expensive, and they can do pretty much anything you need depending upon the size of the room. You may need more or less, but yeah, that's the way to go.
Next question.
Robert Sababity in Poland up next. Does Mimo Live allow you to easily and quickly jump from one production format to another, literally 2 back-to-back events?
Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. You can actually have 2 files that you simply have opened to do that, or you can have you can just close one file and open another file. But you absolutely can switch those over really, really fast. So I haven't had any trouble with that. I've done that a couple times, and it's I have to admit, I don't like 2 of them open at the same time, but I do. You can open 2 projects at the same time. I close one, open the next one, so there's a couple seconds. But you probably could push them back to back and make it work as well. But it's pretty good. I spent the weekend making updating it. We may show it somewhere in the future for the Michael Krasny show, but I'm starting to get my head around the app in a pretty good way. So we'll cover it again.
And we've got a great week for you set up here on Office Hours. So again, thank you so much, producers, for your questions as we get ready to make our transition. So today, tomorrow, I should have started with tomorrow, we'll do 3D model capture with an iPhone, and that will be with show links. So they will... as we'll talk through scanning 3D models and how they're generated by the iPhone. And then on Wednesday, we'll have Matthew Bruntner. And so he's a UVA professor, and we'll be taking us through sound and going through his music and as he explores how he's doing that in the Virginia coast. And on Thursday is a to be announced. So you want to stay tuned to the newsletter, the email that goes out each and every day, in addition to the schedule for the week, but then also some of the labs that we have. And then on Friday, we'll be talking about VLAN and understanding how that will help producers as you are working on your shows. And on Saturday, it's our question and answer show. So if for some reason, some way, somehow during the week, you don't get your question answered or you don't get time to put that in, come in on Saturday, and we've got our great panel answering those questions. And of course, on Sunday, that's our introspective show. So that's time where Alex and all of our panelists, we get a chance to just kind of sit back, relax a little bit more. These are more of our theoretical types of questions, and we really get to dive into just even office hours. And that's, Alex, right? That's when a lot of the questions that get asked are just around... I noticed that it's really around what's the future of office hours, and
I think that usually on Saturday and Sunday during the week we were pretty formatted, but Saturday and Sunday are a little bit looser, and so Saturday is usually where we are testing new technologies, we're training new staff, we're putting things together. Still a great conversation. And oftentimes, a lot of people that you don't see during the week show up on Saturday to answer your questions, and so it's a great way to get some of that extra content there. We also have right after it, typically, or kind of right after it, because usually Saturday runs a little bit short. But at 9 o'clock, we'll have the volunteer meeting. So we had a new volunteer meeting, which was great. We had a lot of people showing up for the new volunteer meeting last Saturday. This coming Saturday is the volunteer meeting where we get nuts and bolts. These are the opportunities. We've got a lot of both ongoing things like people working on the show here. We have people that are working on the website, people are working on the emails, people working on the different all the different days that you work through those things, as well as specific shows, which is like the Eclipse. We have a team that's built up for the Eclipse. We've just started building a team up for NAB. So we've got almost
I see all of that
50
in Discord. So
Yes.
excited for those coming up. So you definitely, producers and those watching, you definitely want to, first of all, join the community. So then that way you can get an opportunity to participate in these phenomenal activities. And then we also have labs that happen in after hours. And that way you really can get your hands on not only the tech, but it's more intimate and just getting a chance. So what you see here, we just dive in all the more deeper there. And that's all. You can find that all at officehours.global. And if you have questions that you're not able to ask during the live show, just head over to Ask Office Hours. And we are back for our second hour with MIKY BLAK, founder of the Republik. MIKY, welcome to Office Hours. So happy to have you here.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So MIKY and MIKY, I look at MIKY as a mentor because just having over 20 plus years, 25 years in the agency world and working with the CPGs out there, Procters and Gamble, and just the breadth of your background. And I know I wouldn't call myself a new agency person at all, but when you get a chance to just sit at the feet of veteran people who understand the shifts that have taken place from over the years in the agency world, and now with how things are playing out with AI, and you've just had a great opportunity to be on the forefront of that. And here at Office Hours, our community is all about what's happening now, next, and what do we need to look out for. So this is a chance that we get to ask you all these questions. So to our producers, as we get in, and I know that our panel, as you get ready to raise your hands, as we get into, I'm just going to ask you a few questions as we get started, MIKY, and specifically advertising. Why? How did that come about?
Good question. So I initially started my career in film. Well, I started in finance and then worked on Wall Street a couple of years until I got sick of it. And I was like 23 or 24 at the time. And I was like, oh, I should do something fun. And then I went into film. At the time in New York, the different production companies had to register at the mayor's office. So I'd go down and get the list at the mayor's office and then knock on the doors of production companies until somebody hired me. And then I got tired of doing that and needed to get a new job every like 6 to 9 months. And then I figured out my agency friends had a gig like all the time with holidays and benefits. And so I went from film into advertising, and then did about 16 years, 17 years. I don't like saying the numbers, makes me feel old. But
we like numbers here. We like numbers here because it just shows, though, again, just the shifts that you've been able to be a part of. And we've had a lot of conversations around just even, I know some of the things that really got my interest with you and what you've done early last year really was just being able to build out for your clients, like building out a workflow and building out a system for them, and so that they understand how to use their own data in this. And if you can and dive into that a little bit of why you realize or what made you think like, okay, AI now for this space.
Well, so I'll start by saying it's not necessarily AI now. So probably about 12 years ago, I was working, it was in New York with Havas, the IBM Innovation Lab, and they were doing the stuff with Watson. And that was 12 years ago. The different projects there, where I really saw it make a difference was when they did the integration with like Sloan Kettering Hospital, and you got to see the AI sort of like crunch on data and come up with these solutions, not only in terms of what they say, the human assistance that it gives, whether it be medical professionals, but the ability to communicate in different ways, new ways. You've got a patient who shows up and they're, non-English speaking, and maybe you only have fractional medical records. It's difficult for a person to be able to circumvent those sorts of challenges real time. But we saw with the platforms, those sorts of things had potential. We also worked with other clients that were interested in seeing what it could do. And at the time, it was like, what, on Jeopardy and solving questions. But it was also, we did a project with the US Open and it crunched the data. And so you knew all this statistical stuff. It was like having Bob Costas in your pocket as the game happens. You know, you have all the data of the relevance and the implications on the game. So you saw, and that was, again, 10, 11 years ago, but you saw the potential then. I think it outlined two things to me. I think it outlined just the potential and the power there, but also just the mechanics of how it worked. I saw these engineers just dumping in crazy amounts of data. And I realized, oh, it's really just the churning of all that data. And it makes it less mystical. It's not that, you know, like that magical mystery when you realize it's really just the aggressive processing power of data. Fast forward now, we see the consumer uses of it, but I think a lot of brands are also seeing the historic benefit of a lot of data. Like you mentioned Procter & Gamble, got like probably about 50 years of tangible data in terms of assets in market and campaign research. So now they're seeing the power of that data in a new way, in a new context, now that those same platforms and systems can kick out creative outputs. You're just seeing a different level of that use of information.
And I like how you touched on too, just like the innovation side of things and being a part of, because at the time when you were a part of those spaces, like what were some of the things that caused them? Well, how would you then determine, okay, this is something, because there's always something new. There's always something shiny and flashy. So how do you determine, okay, this is what we should keep our eye on. Okay, we'll put this on ice for now. What does that process look like for you?
You know, it's not as analytical as you would think. It's really just what is exciting. You know, what are those projects that when, 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night comes, you're still obsessed with? I think it was two technologies at the time were AI and blockchain technology. And I think it's funny, fast forward 10 years, those are the dominant technologies that you'll see in the space, and seeing just determine whether it be production processes or tech solutions. But I think it's just that raw excitement, whether it be in the media space or technology space, you can't really beat that grassroots excitement that people have for the technologies. And then that's how you see the innovation around the projects. So really, when you look at the blockchain technologies, you saw the consumer use of NFTs and independent coins just take the world by storm. Likewise, you've seen the application of whether it is like Drakeify your favorite song or Kanyeify your favorite song, take the marketplace by storm. So it's not necessarily, you don't need to be a scientist to figure it out. We're seeing it in consumer hands, and it just takes the environment by storm. You can't ignore it.
And speaking of Kanyeifying and all of those viral types of projects, what's one project that you can think of and sharing with our community? Because we run the gamut. We have folks film, production, tech, all the way around. What would you, if you could think back of like this project that you just like were happy that you sunk your teeth into it and you're extremely proud of?
Historic or present?
Either.
Well, I'll go present, because the one project actually we're in progress on now. It was for a financial services client, and they're doing a event series. It's like a financial literacy event series focused on the African American market, and so we had the thought process of strategically what can kind of make this come to life. And we realized pictures were a big part of these events one photographer that stuck out of my mind was like, I think it was like Gordon Parks did this photography thing of all these, jazz musicians. And it's a legacy thing and it's like cultural iconic event. And I was like, well, what if you could actually bring Gordon Parks and have him do a photograph of the people or attendees? Now, Gordon Parks is long passed away. We don't have Gordon Parks, but we've got a legacy of his work in the public market. And so what we did was we created an AI model that took somebody's portrait and made it like it was a Gordon Parks photograph portrait. And it brought incredible life to it. But for me, as an African-American, it brought just like an incredible nuance to the expression of how our culture is portrayed in media. Just as there was a sensitivity to it that just, was above and beyond what you would see in a lot of the generative art that's out there. So it was an interesting example of what's possible, what happens when you bring true cultural relevance, true market insights, true like cultural history and richness to the platform, to these technologies. So for me, it was an eye opener. In the process of it, I just looked at it as 1 + 1 = 2. I didn't really think anything of it. But once you see it on the other side, you realize it's one of those situations where 1 + 1 = 3. So it was just a very meaningful example that was surprising. I think there's some other things where you're involved, I think, where you expect innovation, you expect the thing, but sometimes you're just going along, your day and doing a project that seems rote and something brilliant comes out of it. That would be my example.
That's awesome. And I see the panels got their hands up here. Let's go to Alex.
I got a couple questions. Thank you so much for joining us. One is, how do you see, as you were talking about data earlier, how do you see like what Apple is doing as far as tightening the ability to track their users? How does that affect what you do?
So it's been, first party data has to be the objective for marketers going forward. You need to have a relationship that you understand how to cultivate with your audience, whether or not you're an independent marketer in your email list or you're somebody, large marketer who, doesn't get the data from Facebook that they used 2 years ago or Google or whomever. I think worldwide, you're starting to see that tightening. You can see it in Europe happening much faster than it happens here, but that's just the reality. But I think that keen, smart marketers understand how to manage and develop and curate a relationship with their consumers. Johnson & Johnson, for example, their product touches their client the moment they enter the world. They're not going to be impacted by what Apple does in terms of third-party data. Like, if you're really in this business, that's not really going to impact you. A lot of marketers got like 100-year-old brands that they're not going to be impacted so much.
And how do they develop that relationship with first party? Is it content? Is it like, what do they use to make that connection?
Well, yes. So right there, content has never been more relevant than ever before, but also content takes different forms and fashions, right? So you've got event content. You can't ignore, the real world touch points that you have with your consumers. Speaking of Johnson & Johnson, I remember one execution they did was they supported a documentary movie about babies worldwide. So you've got different ways to really insert yourself into the lives of your consumers. You just have to be imaginative, but it's no different than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. The job is still really the same.
Bill, Oh, go ahead, Alice.
No, go good, Bill.
Yeah, so I'm just interested, so much of advertising and marketing is based on metrics and always has been. And we're now in an area where you've got bots, spoofs, charlatans all working to game that system and try to inflate their numbers past where they actually are. So how do you deal with getting accurate audience metrics in this crazy Wild West we're in?
It's the cash register. The cash register never lies.
So you just go for a return on investment. And
at the end of the day,
good,
like I've got one client who was just remarking on their numbers year over year, and that's really at the end of the day, that's how they figure out what's working. Like that's yeah.
Yeah. So that probably impacts my second part of the thing, which is, we used to think about ADI, area of dominant interest, and that's where you would market to. Now that that's essentially global and everybody on their computer doing anything can theoretically reach the entire global in real time, how can somebody define what a target market is for them and not waste their time going after people they don't really want or target on the people they do?
So I wouldn't get lost in the technology of it. I think because I work with a lot of founders that go through the journey of figuring out that product market fit. And all the time, it's that real world engagement that counts. If you're a marketer, there has to be some touch point where you're standing face to face with your consumer audience and you understand. It's no different than it was 20 years ago, and the secondary touch point might have been, how do you know what people want to see on TV, radio, or telemarketing phone calls? It's because you know that consumer in real life, and those other secondary touch points are just sort of extension of the relationship you've built on your primary experience.
But even if the metrics are telling you that everybody wants reality TV because that's where the eyeballs are going, and you're going, there has to be something better than that.
So everybody doesn't want everything at the same time. So and it's so the timing is even more pertinent today. Like I sat in on a presentation from Amazon at the top of the year when they were rolling out their new systems, and literally they have a profile that changes the data score on an individual by the hour. So
oh, wow.
You, Bill, have a certain data score right now. In 60 minutes, you will have a different data score.
I can blow it all that fast, huh?
Well, it's not really blow it all, but you're going to be in a different, frame of mind. Your psychographic might be different at 5 o'clock when it's time to go home, and you might be thinking about Whole Foods and what are you going to get on your way home versus noon and you're at your desk maybe getting an Amazon order. They're tracking that behavior literally throughout the day.
Yeah, it's a different ball game now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of neat because there was a question earlier where someone had said they were in a different area and then just the ads that they were getting. So what you just shared there, like literally sitting at your desk and between the hours, of 9 to 12, what might be being served up to you, retargeted towards you, and how that impacts. Is that something that, while it was an Amazon presentation, is that something where you see just the personalization just getting
what the new advancements in technology, whether it be geolocation technologies or the AI itself being able to build a profile, just gives the platforms that much more depth and dimension to be able to if you want to look at it in a negative sense, you could say market. But if you want to look at it as a positive sense, to be able to serve, like they say, the difference between an ad and helpful communication is just context and where you are when you receive it. So it just gives them more dimension to be able to deliver that message.
Courtney.
Yeah, you may have just answered my question. I mean, for decades, advertisers have used demographics and data analysis to predict trends in marketing. Have the new AI tools have the ability, other than the speed of which they can analyze a trend, let's say, to find out what's trending on social media or what the most popular Google search is, to target advertising? Is that used? Does that just speed up the process, or how is AI used today that's any better than the tools that have been used in the past for advertising targeting?
Yeah, so I think yes, it does make it faster, but it also makes it more efficacious. It makes it more contextually relevant. I think it does it in two ways specifically. First, in terms of the insights and learnings, the rate at which you can digest, process, and then respond to, and it's not always just like blanket data or analytics. Sometimes it is consumer communications. Like if you've got, whether it be via chat, via SMS, feedback from customers, you can process that and respond to it much faster. It makes the production of your content, whether that be business communications, marketing communications, that much more faster and efficacious to produce. So say, for instance, in the agency environment, we all probably know how long it takes to brief, whether it be a writer or a designer on a project. It might take a day. It may take 2 days to coordinate people's schedules. You can now brief, whether it be an AI model that is meant to kick out Google ads or an AI model that's meant to kick out photography within minutes and have actionable assets that you can then proceed to go into market with. So whether you're an overworked marketing director or marketing manager, or you're an entrepreneur, you now have access to tools that make your message that much more powerful, that much more accurate, that much more deliberate. So I think it's a combination between the business intelligence that it gives you, real world, not just analytics, but being able to digest relevant communications, and then being able to produce the content to action upon it, whether it be client communications or assets in market.
So you could use generative AI to generate a campaign with images and everything without even having to worry about hiring a photographer and models and clearance and all of that stuff. And get it on the air very quickly. Yeah.
Correct. Like you see the difference between when I first got into the business, stock image from Getty would cost us $100,000. I remember Procter & Gamble, $100,000 a clip for an image. Fast forward, you've got stock photography. As of 5 years ago, you could get the same image for much cheaper. Then you've got images that are stock photography that were free, whether it be Pixel or Upsplash. Now, nobody even uses those because they're generating their own original content. They don't have to credit anybody, but also if they want that same image again, but this time winter version or this time for my Mother's Day campaign, they can just take the seed code from that image, duplicate it. Oh, make this one with a fur coat or whatever it is. Now, you don't have that photographer bill. You don't have that stock bill. You don't have just even the process used to go through. I used to spend $1,500 on pencil sketches before the photo shoot. So you get $2,000, $3,000 before you even are ready to go to the photo shoot. Now you can do that like within minutes.
Alex?
Yeah, one of the things that's always a challenge is you get something that works and then you use it to a point where it doesn't work anymore, and so like we saw this with, action film, big action films, hero films, Marvel kind of went to that well over and over and over again, and it was printing money, and then it just stopped, and people just got to a certain level. Do you think that there is a place where when we're using all the data and we're, kind of constantly stimulating the user to react, that they get tired of that, like that they push back on those things and start to pull? Because I noticed for me, like I was talking to someone, I hadn't noticed it, but I almost never use the web on my phone. And I was trying to think about why it was. I was like, oh, it's all those ads. Like, there's all these ads that show up on my phone. And I just I go into Apple News, or I go into Flipboard, or I go into other things like that are easy for me to navigate those things. And do you think that there's a chance that we kind of overuse some of those resources to a point where they're not as productive?
I don't think so. And so to use your analogy of the big blockbuster films, I think the shape and context you might get tired of, but movies themselves don't go away. It might be a different type of movie. It might be a different actor, but the concept of it, being an entertainment resource doesn't go away. And I think sometimes in the marketplace, you may have a wealth of assets that are easily identifiable as AI, and they've got a certain style and a certain look to them. But I think the use of the technology in the process is not going away. It's not going away. It's like the internet. So there used to be a day when you used to get a taxi, and you had to get a taxi, you had to know all of the streets in New York. You had to take a test. You had to get a medallion, and it would cost you about, I think it was at one point was $100,000 to get a medallion to be a
$150,000. Yeah. Absolutely.
So Uber just totally ratified what it took to enter into that market. And so when you look at whether it be the multi-million-dollar campaign, I think you're going to see a day when people are going to have campaigns that are just as efficacious shot on the iPhone and executed on Midjourney, and at a fraction of the production cost, achieve similar success.
What do you think that will do to the market? Because we are, just looking at, okay, agencies and what they're doing and their costs, and then, but you could have someone in high school who's been honing their skills because these kids are born with, devices in their hands. Mm-hmm, what do you see? What do you predict?
So change is coming. And I'll say, I remember when I first got into the business, one of the gigs I enjoyed the most, I was a production manager for a place. We did all the production for Universal Records, Sony Records, Tommy Boy, and Arista Records. Super great time. We used to do CDs and records and cassettes and all those things. Unfortunately, all those things go away. People that make music didn't go away, but I remember how much it used to cost just in printing film to make the plates, to make the packaging, and all that other good stuff. The market changes. So we can pretend it doesn't change, but it does. So it is going to change. I think the need for consumer marketing content is not going to go away. I think the need for it to be intelligent is not going to go away. I think even though a 17-year-old can make a website and make all these assets, they're not going to have the insight that it takes to craft content to talk to a mom whose child is suffering from cancer. That's a real thing. So if you're a medical marketer, if you are a financial services marketer, you're still going to need the intelligence and the insight to be able to communicate and deliver that message to people in that age range, in that demographic. So I think those things will remain relevant. The craft that you do will remain relevant, but the means by which, there's not going to be as many photographers. There's not going to be the big production shoots as often. Those things will change, but I think the end goal of what you deliver to clients will still be the same.
Ken.
Yeah, with the rapid development of new AI tools, how much, because I'm finding at the time in researching on, now we know Gemini 1.5 and the Sora release, just in time spent looking at what new AI tools has come out to supersede ones that you're presently doing. So I suppose development time is how much of that your time is spent looking at different tools, what's coming out on the horizon to know what to move to next.
A lot, a lot. I think, but that's no different. I don't think that's been any different than I remember when I was young in film, and you were working on Avid and smoke machines and all the different technologies that were present there in that time. I think specifically in media, the cross-section of media technology, you're always going to be in that zone of how do we make it better, faster, smarter, more capable. But to answer your question, a lot, I think to avoid the time drain or to make it most efficacious to what your aim is, I think you have to understand what your objectives are and understand the framework, at least a framework of what your ideal solutions would be. So like for various startups we'll work with, there is a specific objective, like they need to make certain assets in certain environments for certain purposes. And so a lot of times our research will be narrowed in that regard to the solutions that make sense for that client. Otherwise, you could, I think, to answer your question, or the spirit of your question might be, how do you avoid that spin of that always being a new thing, always being a new solution? I think if you have a framework that you're trying to solve for, your vision will be narrowed. Your vision will be refined to look for the answers to the questions you have versus just like running after every shiny new thing.
Bill?
Yeah, I'm just kind of interested as whether or not all this algorithmically generated stuff, particularly in scripting and stories and things like that, might get to the point where you're just homogenizing everything so much. I mean, instead of 1,000 people in writers' rooms, now you're going to have maybe 1 million people going, I need a meet cute rom-com. And all of a sudden, the AI is going to be cranking out gazillions of these things. So how do you curate among a flood like that and find unique voices, distinct ideas, and celebrate humanness when you've got so much being cranked out?
So listen, I think Hollywood does a really great job of cranking out identical rom-coms year after year by themselves. So I think the real answer is looking at it as a tool that enables people to amplify voices that didn't have means before. So specifically, whether it be somebody who has a story to tell but can't craft it because of language barriers or literacy barriers, you now have these tools in the hands of people that can now see a means of amplifying their own voice. So I think you'll have more of a diversity of important messages that wouldn't have seen the level of exposure that they now have access to. You now have,
Well, that's really fascinating, but I used to work a lot with the National Speakers Association, and I remember one person at one point saying, everyone has a signature story. They used to emphasize that a lot in professionals trying to get into the speaker. What's your signature story? What have you got that's authentic to you? And it turns out that in some circumstances, I found that it was the person checking me in at the desk who finally stood up and told their story that blew me away. And I came to feel like everybody has that story. And so that's my concern now. If millions of people have the ability to generate this content, how do you figure out the most compelling of those? How do people even find things anymore?
Well, it's going to be almost like self-identification, right? The most compelling story to you isn't the most compelling story to me. So it's not as if we were going to be flooded. I think you'll have more access to the content that speaks to you. You'll automatically find yourself in spaces where that content is relevant. So I think it's not an issue of there being too much. I think the relevant content will find its audience because they'll be in appropriate spaces.
And is there concern that maybe just the most outre, outrageous, and not-so stories will attract the most eyeballs because people will go there?
No, I don't think that's any different than humanity before AI.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
Go ahead, Ken.
Do you find, we find with some clients, they have concerns about putting their data in some of these large language models, so we're having to develop local models. Are you seeing that?
Yes, that is a big concern. Yes, you are totally on point with that one. Yes, you do not want to put sensitive data in the large language models. A lot of enterprise clients are building singular models or certain pathways, what they'll call data pathways, where they can control what data is contributed to the model, what data is kept on their proprietary side of the fence. But yes, that is a very big issue. with proprietary information. Even some folks were seeing when they would make their custom models available that through certain dialogue sequences, you could derive the input content or input data that the models were trained on. So, yes, that is a big concern. Definitely be aware and conscious of the data you are inputting, not only for your own organizations but your client organizations. And be just very mindful of that.
And Jason,
how do you handle clients who start by saying, I want a really creative thing, and then end up with this insane marketing myopia where they actually just want the same thing over and over again?
I think there's one thing that as a good strategy. This is the yes and strategy. And as long as they're feeling heard, because sometimes it's not that they want the same thing. I think sometimes they want to be recognized for their intelligence or their achievement or their perspective. So it's the yes and approach. Like, yes, we can do that. Or yes, we will make sure that that's seen. But then you can add on whatever that secret sauce is or that new innovation is to say, you know what, I think this would really bring that to life, or this would really add on extra dimensions. It's the yes and.
And before, as we get into, and I think Jason's laughing because Jason, when he responds to questions, he's always got that yes and concept there. So I see the questions coming in. So before we get to our producer questions, I wanted to give this also an opportunity for you to talk about just network AI, because I immediately went to the agency side, but not only that you are mentoring founders and an investor, but then also building as well.
Yeah, so I'll put it in a nutshell. What I think is really the thing we're trying to build. It's almost like Amazon.com, but for business services. I think the social side of whether it be LinkedIn or other platforms that give professionals access to each other are great. I think there just needs to be a means to execute service on those platforms. I think the closest thing you've got to it are like Fiverr and Upwork or something like that. But I think where those things miss the mark, where platforms like Amazon, for instance, have been able to really nail it, is just the consistency or continuity in terms of business practice and structure on the platform. So we've been spending out of the last 2 years on building out the technology of it. It's a CRM platform, but also has a social aspect to it. And we're trying to bridge that gap between social and commerce, specifically for business services. So we're beta testing now. We've got a couple of clients that we do bespoke solutions for. But that's really our big vision, is being that sort of like Amazon for business and professional services.
All right, Bill, let's get into these questions.
Let's dive in. David Brady has our first question out of New York. He says, as AR/VR becomes more prevalent, what can we consumers do to prevent a Minority Report world where the advertisers know you more than is comfortable? And there's a link there.
Go ahead, Mickey.
I think you're already there. I think that you're already there. I think, and again, it all depends on how you look at it, right? So if you're in New York and you're walking into the Gap and somebody shows you the sweater you like, it might feel invasive, right? But alternatively, if your grandmother walks into the hospital and she can't speak or there's language barrier, you'll want that sort of level of insights into what that person needs, whether it be via, bio-identifiable things, whether you wear it or they can just see it on your face. You're already there. But it just depends on the context of service, whether it's meant to save your life or just sell you a new sweater.
Next question.
Rick Markley in Barabu says, what are some useful AI tools for non or not typically creative marketing uses? For example, SEO, accounting, HR, management, shipping, logistics, and so forth.
Yeah.
I think as I think one tool that if you're like and he said he's a non-technical user. Is that what he said?
He did, yeah.
I think ChatGPT is a really great place to start for non-technical users because of just the casual language ability. You can really kind of steer your own ship and go at your own pace. I think that's a good place to start.
Next question.
Kenny Hampton in Greenville, Illinois, up next. Mikey, how do those who create their own marketing images now protect those from those who would take or alter them for their own uses? Does this new content generation use a long-standing copyright method?
Go ahead, Mickey.
So there's certain aspects to the large language models that are able to track the use of specifically in like prompt language. So say, for instance, if I were to make a creative asset that says, hey, inspired by Jackson Pollock, it would be able to track that language and stop it for copyright use and tag it as such. So there are certain guardrails in that regard. But the technology is so present and so prevalent. It's a little bit like the question around tracking the rights to an image on the internet was, 15 years ago. It's possible, but it is a little bit like the Wild West in terms of, yes, there's going to be copyright infringement.
Alex?
Well, and how much, as you build out your assets, I know that I use Midjourney pretty heavily, but I rarely use the final asset. I'm usually inspired by the asset. So I'll build, I'll go through an idea and build 800 or 1,000 images in a half an hour. And then I'll look through them, and it's kind of like a vision board, or a mood board, where I'm looking at all these images and I like what it did here. I like what it did there. So it's more of picking out those things. And then usually being able to hand those. I know I work in the visual effects world. I talked to a visual effects supervisor, and they said, what's really great is I put a bunch of stuff together and I go hand it to an artist and say, it feels like this. Like, this is what I'm looking for, and this is the part that I like, and this is the part that I like. How much do you find that you're using the final assets versus using them as a brainstorming tool?
So our objective is to use the final asset. So we put more work in the upfront definition. So we'll spend a lot of time understanding the language inputs and trying to get that nuance. It's sort of like back in photography, like they would say, get it in the camera, make it right in the camera. Or I was just with some musicians, and the engineer said, somebody said, how'd you get that really good record? Or that really good track? And the engineer said, I started with a really good recording. So I think a lot of attention has to be put on the prompts, and we look at it as that language description is the asset. Like, how do we perfect that so it's predictable every time, and that is the asset.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm just interested. You talked about creating prompts and then maybe copying parts of them, something that was supposed to generate maybe a character or something like that. I find with everybody I talk to, particularly in the storyboarding realm, getting consistency between panels of a storyboard where the characters look identical but in different circumstances can be a real big challenge. Do you have any strategies for helping people do that?
Yeah, so I mean, most common folks in Midjourney, there's a seed number. So when a asset is generated, there's relevant code there, and there'll be a seed number that you take that seed number, and that is the person, that is the character. Like you could take that seed number and say, now blah 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 in the woods, and it'll be that same consistent character. Because if nothing else, computers are really good at creating consistent assets. So it's just a matter of know-how.
Copy. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Courtney.
Yeah, if you're generating using AI to generate stuff that you're going to use in an actual commercial, like a spokesmodel, for example, and you decide on a certain demographic of a person that you want to be your spokesmodel, and you generate this artificial person that is now going to be the spokesmodel for, certain tennis shoes. How do you protect yourself against other people using that same image, since it doesn't seem to be copyrightable as is, and using that generated spokesmodel generated with AI, but that you've decided to adopt for your, leading spokesmodel?
So I think it is copyrightable. I think it's no different than if that character came from a pencil, that does come from code. And actually, it probably is more copyrightable because you have generative code that you can point to that produced that character. And I think what you mention is interesting because I see clients use it not necessarily like as a means of interloping into or like just making up any demographic, but when you have brands that are, say, for instance, this is a brand that's Senegalese, and I want the woman to really have Senegalese features, and women in Senegal are different from Ethiopian. Their eye shape is different, and you want that specificity. Or you've got a brand that's, let's say, a Korean brand, and you want a specific feature set of a specific look to be authentic. Those are the instances where I've seen it be successful. When brands really want to make sure that their representation, and a lot of I say that word a lot, but it's a thing. But making sure that there's representation in the content and making sure that the nuance that is present.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Rick Markley in Baraboo. What are your thoughts on Sora?
Great
I think
question.
it's awesome. I think it's awesome. I think specifically the fact that you see that it goes to a minute, right? Like it's previously our AI generated video was really limited to just a few seconds, and I think the limit is like a big leap. Just then the quality of the assets, big leap. So I think it's awesome. I think we're living in a really incredible time. It's happening very fast, but yeah.
And there are some of them, because I watched immediately once it came out, and I saw it going all over social with regards to Sora, Marquise Brownlee, and the awe that was with it, and I love the breakdown that he gave of like why certain clips didn't work, but then the like, okay, now I'm alarmed because he used a video clip that from a year ago. It was the Will Smith one with the spaghetti and how disjointed that looked, and then again our community of production people and videographers. And while it's amazing where the technology has come, how do we keep pace with where it's going?
I think it's very difficult. I remember back in the days with retouchers, and a lot of my friends were retouchers, like fixing photos. That industry isn't the same anymore. And I think, technology sometimes just devours jobs. But I think the why is always going to persist. So the why you do things will always persist. So I think there's always going to be artistry that you can layer on top of these tools. I think when I say the why, like some people have, like mission-based business. If you have mission-based businesses and mission-based campaigns, you're looking at this as a benefit. It's almost like a rocket boost because you can do those things with much less cost, with much faster outputs. But if you made your dollar on that in between, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Alex?
Well, and technology's been putting humans out of work since the wheel was created. There's a lot less people that were required to move things around. And it's just one new thing after another. But do you think that it overall in the long term that the added opportunities will outweigh the lost opportunities?
Yes, so I think it'll cause a paradigm shift in the model, the labor model, and you'll see it now in terms of the creative economy, creator economy, where you'll have a lot of creators that, let's say, 10 years ago would have been, a producer at MTV or Viacom or somewhere else. Now can take that same skill set and produce a six-figure income independently between a platform of social media sites and maybe a Shopify. So I think people in that regard will benefit greatly. I think the traditional job models between technology and just the way that the typical, I think, job market looks like, I think it'll be a future where you'll have a lot of people that are almost like I would say the professional service equivalent of DoorDash. So I think it'll depress the skill needed for that market, and so you'll sort of like DoorDashify everything, because you'll have an AI platform that makes them more or less like a Burger King worker. They just press the buttons and they've got a campaign of banners, and they press that button and they've got their Google ads. So I think...
Would you say that the thing that I saw something on Twitter that went by that I just really kept on thinking about, which is that the final arbiter is taste, like someone with taste. Like they don't need to know how to do it anymore. They don't need to but they do need to know like they got to be able to look at it and know what to choose.
Yes and no. The only reason why I say no, because in marketing and media, just in our landscape, so much of it is determined by the algorithm. A lot of times the success or failure is determined by the algorithm. And once you've got intelligence, you've got the input. So the intelligence, the business insights that are coming from your software, that's de facto taste. It's just the quality of that software. Maybe on top of it, you've got a really insightful strategist, but maybe that's like you've got a smaller strategy team that are super powerful, but the production teams are different. The creative teams are different. So I think it won't be as big of an arbiter as we think because of the business insights.
Courtney?
And do you think these tools like Sora and the upcoming versions of video generation, artificial intelligence, generative tools can reduce your legal liability, or perhaps open up, reduce problems of, for example, if you're trying to find an actor or a celebrity spokesperson, there was a lot of liability if your retouch department thinned down their thighs, there would be a huge backlash. And if it's a digital generated person, there's no one to complain, with maybe just a little disclaimer at the bottom rather than actor portrayal. It'll just say AI portrayal or something as a disclaimer to get you off the hook. And so it would seem that you could then find people to do those, hygiene product ads without having any stigma attached to an individual.
Yeah. To answer your question, yes. So say, for instance, I've been on plenty of shoots where finding every logo in the picture is like finding where is Waldo. So, and it always happens maybe once a year or twice a year, maybe. You've got something in the wild and, there's a Nike logo in there and they don't like it or whatever it is. So yes, you can produce assets where you are certain that there is no, copyright infringement. I've been, worked on campaigns with clients where you've got that spokesperson and you only had a 2-year contract. Well, now it's year number 3 and it really is successful. And they want, 3 times because they know it's successful. Well, the AI isn't going to charge you 3 times as much because it was successful. It just pull that code out of the cloud and spin it off again. So it does answer that issue. And I know for me personally, I've put steering clients in the direction of AI generated assets because you don't have any liability, where real world assets, sometimes your liability can be so layered. Like if you've got a woman and a child, but they're walking down the street and there's a mural on the wall and you didn't know that artist, has copyright on that mural, and now it's in your commercial and they want $80,000. So, there's a real world risk that AI solves in that regard.
And Ken.
Yeah, on the thoughts on Sora, the white paper I thought was really interesting because I didn't fully reveal them on the full of the how they use the data to get the video so quickly, but it is speculated that they're using 3D modeling because the 3D modeling application now is so realistic that if you use that to train, then there is no kind of comeback with oh, that was trained from my video. Well, no, I used a 3D model to create that video, and now the engine was then developed based on 3D modeling of data rather than real photos or videos that someone took.
Yeah, that is a good point. I remember just last week, I think I was working with a creator, and they were showing me like all these different environments or scenes. And I thought they had literally like taken the pictures, and then he started moving stuff around in front of my face. And I'm like, what? He's like, oh, this is just 3D models. So to that point, yes, the technology has gotten to a point where it's just so fast that it kind of blurs that separation between what's derived from even real versus, animated.
And we've got our next question.
One more. Roscoe Jones, Madison, Indiana. When working with founders, what are some of their biggest blind spots? And what misconceptions of AI on their part have you had to overcome?
Good question. Biggest blind spots is figuring out that product market fit. I think a lot of times founders, the biggest thing they have is it seems great in their idea and in their head versus collecting real world data. I think there's an underappreciation of real world engagement. Everybody wants to see the algorithm or figure out what the trend is. But I think the ones that, whether it be holding events or finding cause to really be in a room with your consumer audience, are the ones that are successful. I think that the biggest blind spot is thinking you could do it behind a computer. You'll have to get in the room with your consumer audience at some point.
This has been phenomenal, Mickey. I'm like looking at our panel and they're just like awestruck. So before we wrap for the day, I always like to leave our guests with parting words or anything else that they just want to share and leaving for our audience. So the floor is yours.
I think what you guys are doing is awesome. I think specifically in this time where teams, specifically media and technology teams, are remote and spread out, I think the community that you're building here is awesome. I think a lot of times people don't always look to share information, so I appreciate the platform and just the practice of like the open dialogue, open discussion. So I'm just thankful. Just thank you.
So awesome. Well, Mickey, where can we find you online?
So I'm a LinkedIn guy. I'm a LinkedIn maniac. So you can find me at MIKY BLAK on LinkedIn. I'm there all the time.
Oh, I have one more question. What's next for you?
For me, I think really just sort of like cracking the nut on this social commerce for business professional services. I think there's the trinity. So there's always, like they say, leader of self, leader of others, leader of leaders. And in this latest thing, in terms of just participating in the community, kind of refining my step in the journey of being a leader of leaders and trying to contribute to the community in that way. So just that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, MIKY BLAK. And to our producers, thank you so much for your questions. And of course, our panelists for your insights on all of this dialogue during our second hour. And of course, to our back-end team, for without which this would not be possible. So now I'm looking at the Taluk Traversal. We have traveled 61,062 miles. That is 98,271 kilometers. That's more than 483 million bananas for scale. And if you are looking for the schedule for the rest of the week, you can just head over to officehours.global and know that you can ask your questions at any time. That's askofficehours.global. And we will see you next time. Bye.
That was great, Mickey. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mickey,
Thank you.
That was good.
Cool.
There were some
setup, by the
comments
way, as
about
well.
your guitars.
we're as you may have guessed, we're kind of geeks, and we usually have to warn people like, hey, you might want to update your setup before you come on the show, because a lot of us have pretty good setups. And you showed up, I was like, oh, there we go.
Fit right in.
Someone who understands. Someone understands what we do here. So it's
I'm
really,
into
really
it.
good.
I'm into it. Thank you.
Yeah, it looks
Thank
great.
you. Really great questions, by the way. It was super, super great. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's fun.
Our community is known for asking really good questions. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Mickey.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Mickey.
y'all.
Cool. Thanks. Cheers.
Thanks, back-end team. Ken, so nice to see you.
Great show, Liberty.
Thank you.